Greetings.
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 My message this morning is experiencing Christhood through suffering. Experiencing is feeling the energy of the Christhood through suffering. But before I begin my message, I make a comment on the cataclysmic event that is happening now in the US and some foreign countries. I suggest when you think of what was reported by the media, that you look for the good and praise it. This event has provided the energy of benevolence, compassion, and kindness for the entire world by the generosity of people, cities, and counties who have stepped in to provide food, shelter, water, and clothing for those souls who volunteered to participate in this event to aid humanity in its evolution of humanhood. We know now that we are receiving the energy, the essence of the human being, which we call the human being, which is spirit. So we look for the good and let our conversations be for the good. As Reverend Marcia said this morning, to send the light and love throughout the country, throughout the world, for those who are now experiencing the results of that event. Look for the good and praise it, Dr. Holmes said. Now for our message. Human beings are addicted to suffering through attachment. And we were not made to suffer. Suffering is based in fear. Yet we are drawn to so-called fun activities to scare us into screaming, closing our eyes, and the many gestures we make when we are in high places off the ground, haunted houses, movies, just to name a few. We do not realize that fear is the motivating factor that draws us to those activities. We tell ourselves it's fun. You see, we created those ideas to help us to feel alive. For we have lost our enthusiasm for living. So we create activities to help us to feel alive. Listening to the words of our song. Now that I can go to my heart, and this is my interpretation. Now that I realize that the God within me is me, as me, I can feel alive. Ask yourself, how am I addicted to suffering on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels of your being? Look at your automatic behaviors to see if they are based in love or fear. For we have been told there are only two responses in life, and that is in love or fear. Simply change the behavior if it is not love-based. Accept the feeling, as your body will tell you how you feel when you think the behavior through. We share with you some ways in which humanity suffers on all levels of our being, which we can use to help experience or feel the energy of the Christhood through pleasure. You see, according to the dictionary, the opposite of suffering is pleasure. page 109, 3 in our textbook, and I read, suffering may be salutary, in that it leads us to a place where we learn it is not necessary. We shall cease to suffer as we move more closely to our ideas of suffering and comply with the laws of the universe. Further, he said, all suffering is the result of some infringement of these laws, these universal laws. So I will stop here, but I suggest you read the chapter on man relationship in the Science of Mind textbook. You see, we don't know what we don't know. We have not known the subtle behavior patterns or laws we have created that causes suffering. And I will share with you later in the message. As a reminder, Science of Mind tells us how we can change. It was called the do-it-yourself religion some years ago because we must become willing. We must accept. We must take the reins to change our behavior patterns. Human beings were conditioned to suffer in order to awaken to the magnificence of the God within. The word suffer was coined to mean to allow. And I looked at that scripture, suffer little children to come unto me. I thought of my idea of suffering, and I said that could not be. And in my research of the word, suffer means to allow. Suffer little children to come unto me. And he could only say me for himself. I could not think that the teacher of Christianity would want our idea of suffering restored upon little children. Children is metaphorically a symbol of our behavior patterns, our archetypes, or our prototypes, as Dr. Holmes wrote. The solution to suffering is loving yourself unconditionally, not criticizing yourself for what you think are mistakes, loving the God within. And I learned by saying, I love myself 5,000 times a day. And in these times, I find myself having to say, I love myself more and more to bring the love essence in to help to drive out the darkness that is pervading our planet at this time. You see, we develop intimate relationships with people by telling them and ourselves that we love them over and over until we convince ourselves we really do love them. Same is the process with the God within. We must convince ourselves about our love for God. Repeat, we must convince ourselves about our love for God. Remember in my last message, I stated there are 32 verses in the King James Version of the Bible to fear ye the Lord. And when I read it, I said it is impossible, for you cannot fear and love at the same time. Think about it. The self of you is your perfection of the God within. The self of you, or the human being, is your perfection of the God within. It is what society has labeled as human being, but we are two spirits, pure spirit. We were only labeled human beings for understanding or expansion of what we already know. Our problems are suffering, all of them, whether they are physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, stem from our relationship with the God within. We ask, what do you think about when you're not meditating? Anything that causes you stress is suffering, as well as actions you are not aware of. The Siddhartha, we know, as was the founder of Buddhism, and his mission was to help humankind to stop suffering. And I'm sure you all know the story of how he became the Buddha. It's on the internet if you're interested. He said, and I quote, "The root of suffering is attachment. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, he turns away from suffering." End quote. And my understanding of this quote is that when one is attached to things and sees that all things made can be destroyed, he loses the attachment or that energy and is no longer suffering. In viewing our behavior of suffering, we must include what we are attached to, what it is that we think about that we cannot live without, what it is that we think about all the day long when we are not meditating. We shared spiritual practice of releasing helps to free us from much suffering. We have shared many messages on how to detach from material objects. We become attached to our children, our loved ones, our automobiles, our jewelry, our clothing, material things, people, places, and things, and we lose ourselves in those attachments. Someone wrote, "We worship our creations, not the Creator." Now let us look at suffering on all four levels of our being, and we begin with the physical, and that is because we are more conscious of observing. When you ignore the physical signals from the body, not drinking water when you're thirsty instead of grabbing a soft drink, not resting the body when you feel sleepy, doing what you do not want to do, doing employment chores, filling appointments you don't want to keep instead of saying no, you are creating fear and setting yourself up for suffering. Another one is when we say we are relaxing. What are you doing, or what are you thinking about when you are relaxing? Life is movement. Creation is movement, not relaxing. Relaxing brings energy of alarm, tense, tightening internally, stiffening of the body, no movement. Bottom line, you must decide what you mean by relaxing. I have a longer list of how I suffer physically, and I suggest you make your own list to move out of suffering, to feel the energy of the Christhood through love. I just wanted you to start becoming aware of the subtle ways in which we suffer and are unaware of creating fear instead of love. Take a few minutes and think about how you create suffering on the physical level. Let me say, if you're not experiencing happiness, joy, and beauty, you are suffering. Look for ways to make yourself happy. Look for ways to feel joyful. Look for ways to laugh. Find humorous quotes so that you can chuckle and bring forth that energy of joy. Imagine beauty in every form. Become involved with your livingness. Bring the aliveness back into your life without suffering. Begin anew with your next thought. Ask yourself, what makes you happy? Emotionally, what we call feeling is energy in motion from our soul. One way we suffer, as they did it to me, playing victim, ignoring unidentified feeling, stewing in anger, living in the past, hiding by not speaking up when you are bursting to say something which stems from what people will think. Drop the fear. Accept all feelings and call them good and very good, for they are the little children that must come unto me, and you can only say me for yourself. Feeling is energy from your spirit, calling for a higher frequency of thought. Feeling is energy from your spirit, calling for a higher frequency of thought. All energy has always been loving energy from our soul to create higher frequency, simply to expand what we already know. We call it fear out of our innocence of the God within. We've not been conditioned to know who we are, and it is now simply wake-up time. Much of our suffering is anchored in fear of life, of our relationship with the God within. When we change our idea of God, Dr. Holmes said, our God ideas will change automatically. The key is to accept all feeling, images, and thoughts to free yourself from suffering. It's universal law. It brings me to our mental level. How do you suffer mentally? How willing are you to take in ideas you've never heard before? How can you learn something new if you keep digging up what you learned 20 years ago? What your guardians told you? I've always done it this way. It has to go this way. Let all of that go. How willing are you to read or listen to information you never heard before? Listening or reading information of the sort is the cause of your expansion of ideas you learned 20 years ago. My excuse has been that the words are not familiar. So now I get the dictionary to define my words, to make sense for me when reading or hearing new words. What do you think about when you are not meditating? What are you allowing in your mind when you are not meditating? Whatever you put in must come out. And many times it carries remnants of fear, thus the beginning of suffering. Being aware of the present moment helps us to recognize our subtle behaviors. That is when we can change them and free ourselves to create new experiences for tomorrow. We've had an exercise in class that expands our view of how our personal will or feeling, as we call energy, received from our spirit by our awareness of what we think and say. And in doing so, we make space so that the Spirit can give us love in return. When we are aware of what we're thinking and change the tendency, we are open to our spirit to receive love energy to create. The higher the thought, the more love energy we receive. Last but not least, but not the least, spiritually, how to experience the Christ through suffering. How do you practice suffering spiritually? How often do you sit in contemplation of a new idea? My teacher taught me to take a Bible verse and see how many ways I could understand it. And back in those days, in the 70s, I could not rewrite a Bible verse one other way. And it was a good thing that she did not check on me to see if I had completed the assignment, for she knew I would try and perhaps fail, but I tried. Can I tell you how many times I've read the textbook during the last 50 years? However, when I read it now, my idea of what I had 50 years ago has changed. Fast forward, I've rewritten the Christian Lord's Prayer 3 times. And when I hear or read a scripture, I reinterpret it to make sense to me. In closing, the end to suffering is physically, become aware of your behaviors. Emotionally, change your description of your emotion to love. Mentally, become open to new ideas and information. Spiritually, add contemplation and observation to your daily spiritual practices. And let us pray and give thanks for each individual message. We listen with spiritual ears and we follow through on each feeling and thought and bring each one into love. For we are aware right here in the present moment to create love in our life, to experience pleasure. And as you go out into the marketplace, the essence of love that you've received within this hour radiates out through you, healing your world and the world around you. And until we meet again, divine presence goes before you, making your way perfectly clear. All is well. It is done. So be it.
So be it, and so be it. Thank you so much, Reverend Alma. Powerfully deep message this morning. And as let me see, there was someone here, as we welcome Maxine. Maxine could be the one in Florida or in Massachusetts. Not sure. Anyway, welcome. And now it's your turn. It's your turn to make suggestions or give your insights. What are you willing to take away from this? Any epiphanies, any ahas, any yeah buts? All right, so what's in it for you today? What are we going to have?
Reverend Marzia, I want to thank Reverend Alma so much because my idea of suffering has changed dramatically. And I just want to say thank you because last night when I was speaking to her, I was going to debate with her. And as I normally do, but I just want to thank you, Reverend Alma. My idea has changed and I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Yeah. When our ideas change, then we make space for new ideas to come in. And that's all we're asked to do, just to change our idea, change our perception change our way of thinking how it should be or what it should be or how it should go. Leave that to the universe. Change it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And I have to admit, I'm multitasking. However, there's only one mind because I read, as Reverend Alma was speaking, a paragraph in a book I want to share with you all. I'll read it very quickly, but I think it really captures the essence of what she's talking about. If each of us became aware of our magnificence and felt good about ourselves, it seems to me the only thing we'd have to share is our unique nature expressed outwardly in a loving manner that reflects our infinite selves. It follows that the problems that we see in the world aren't from the judgment or hatred we have for others, but for ourselves. Just as the key to my healing was unconditional self-love that eliminated fear, the key to a better world is for everyone to care for themselves the same way, realizing their true worth.
Yes.
Powerful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yes.
That comes from a book called Dying to Be Me. Anita Moorjani, Moorjani, Moorjani.
Okay, great. Thanks.
The title alone, Dying to Be Me, dying, as we've shared with you, means change.
Right.
Are in change. So I have to die to the old ideas of me, to change, simply change the old way that I thought about everything, to expand into my magnificence.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And when you think of dying, you think of pain. And many of us, when we get to the threshold of pain, we pull back because we don't want to have that pain.
If we look at the word dying as simply change, because that's all it is, and we change every day. St. Paul said, I die daily, means he changes daily. He changes his concepts, his perceptions of who he thinks he is, to know the Christ within.
I have a question. You said that we created these activities to help us to stay alive.
Yes.
You know, we're addicted to this suffering, you know, of course it's coming from fear, but we don't know that. We're just addicted, like just waiting for the next hit. So you could expand more on that. We created these activities to help us stay alive.
Yes. I didn't mention horror movies, thrillers. These are ways we like the action, because we can feel then the energy comes up, and we can feel alive, but it's still based in fear. And what we want to do is to recognize or accept that energy and transmute it to love. And it's simply saying, I accept this feeling, I accept this feeling, I accept this feeling, until it changes. And you won't know that unless you practice it. I accept this feeling, I accept this feeling. I share with you my experiences, what I have felt, and how I have moved through the energy. For it is just energy from my soul that's bringing me the higher frequency. And I must accept it.
Wow. Well, that is something. So like Minister Pema having that old catapult of an experience. Because I always question why people there are some people who seemingly enjoy, you know, like a fight and a quarrel and controversy, and especially in politics and so forth. You know, I always wonder why. They're feeling their way to that feeling, to open up to the next level, which kind of strange. Yeah.
Humans are funny spirits. Did you want to speak, Ashley?
Yes, Reverend Alma.
Thank you.
I think you played the ball right down the court, and you're having us contemplating how and where the ball is moving. We haven't got many hands going up right now because we need to replay this message in our mind and physically on the videos, because I think like for me, I need to hear this again and again, as I need to fine tune it in my mind, because I never really looked at suffering from the angle that you brought it.
Yes.
Thank you. That was a beautiful way to. That was a beautiful way that you described it. Thank you. Thank you. When we have ears, we hear, and then we go do the work. Thank you.
I agree with it. There was so much in your talk this morning. It was almost overwhelming because, well, it needs review because there was an awful lot. Because we do suffer physically, mentally, spiritually. And what I got in touch with is that love, for me, got contaminated with suffering. Because as a child, there was a lot of suffering going on in my family. And I loved these people very much. And when I saw them suffering, I associated that with love, my love. My love was causing me to suffer. And so that, I think, was important for me to understand that that contamination now can be, well, I'll share something else that occurred to me. I said, well, when this is over, I've got to vacuum the house. And then what occurred to me is I just got my mind vacuumed from a lot of crazy thoughts. So thank you very much, and I'll stop right there.
Thank you for bringing out the idea that much of the energy of love became involved with the fear, and so that requires us to look at our idea of love. What do we think love is? And we've been told that love is a feeling. We've been told that. And we go to the dictionary, and love is a noun. It is an action. And the more we practice actions of love, the more we can feel our wholeness, because we are made of love. So we can't feel love because we are love. And the way we express it is through our actions. Thank you so very much for bringing that up.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just had to say, in speaking and referring to, Ashley said that we have to review this message and to unpack the many messages. Well, of course, I'm sharing with you the advantage I do have. She and I have, Reverend Alma and I had the conversation earlier about suffering and how we permit that, allow those feelings, those images and thoughts to be a part of our behavior. And so when she was talking this morning, it was peeling back another layer of understanding of how I do permit those ideas that diminish me and negate me to be a part of the way in which I see me. And but I'm working very diligently and with awareness to release me from me. And so that book that Reverend Michelle referred us to, though I have not read it and will read it, I can go along with the title. I am dying to be me. And it is in understanding what suffering is and how suffering, again, like Pima said, I didn't, until mom started talking to me about suffering, I didn't look at suffering as allowing something to occur. I always thought it to be a diminishing type of experience and something that we, in a sense, had no control over. It happened because of the circumstances. But again, I am able to see in a different perspective, from a different perspective, that suffering is a state that we allow to exist allow to exist within our consciousness, and one that we do have some authority over. So I thank you very much for the confirmation and the affirmation for helping me to continue the practice of being aware of me so that I could die and be me.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. And yes, we all have to go review that tape over and over, recording on Further Aglow Ministries. And yes, I will endorse what our speaker said. She bowled us a googly. I love to compare these with this game we call cricket. And when a bowler comes at you as a batsman with a googly or a yorker, yeah, you lose your leg stump. So that's what we got this morning. We are looking around to see where the pins fly. All right, so we'll take a look at that on our YouTube channel as we move along now in our celebration this morning.